The U.S. now in effect tonight. The National Guard moving in. In New York City, a state of emergency now declared. Across the country, the number of cases growing. The chaos overseas tonight as Americans frantically try to get on flights home after President Trump announced overnight travel from Europe to the U.S. would end for 30 days. Tonight, the scare on board a JetBlue flight from JFK to West Palm Beach when a passenger revealed upon landing he had just learned he tested positive. Doctors in this country growing more concerned over the lack of tests. The president saying today it's going very smoothly. But tonight, what Dr. Anthony Fauci acknowledged in front of Congress. On Wall Street tonight, the Dow falling more than 2,300 points, the worst day since this crisis began. We're live. Tonight, the NCAA tournament has been canceled. The NBA suspending its season. At least 5 NBA teams now under self-quarantine. 2 players from the Utah Jazz testing positive just days after one of them playfully touched every microphone on the podium joking about coronavirus. Tonight, his apology. And the most famous soccer player in the world and his team in isolation after one of the players tests positive. Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson both testing positive for coronavirus as well. And tonight, Tom Hanks' message about their symptoms and what comes next for them. From Italy tonight, the toll worsening, a brother posting a heartbreaking video inside a home, his sister losing her battle. Teams arriving behind him days after he started begging for help. Authorities now say Italy is still 2 weeks from its peak. And President Trump and this image tonight, a Brazilian official to the far right, just days ago at Mar-a-Lago standing beside the president. That official has now tested positive for coronavirus. The president is asked, will he be tested?
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Thursday night. And it was another day of fast-moving developments in this coronavirus emergency, and we will carefully get through it all right here with you tonight. We're going to begin with the states of emergency across this country, and now here in New York City, a state of emergency declared as well. Tonight, more than 1,300 people sickened in the U.S. At least 39 have died in this country. At least 45 states now and the District of Columbia reporting cases. Additional school districts shutting down today. Now 4.9 million school children across the country at home. That first containment zone now in effect. The National Guard on the scene in New Rochelle, New York, just outside the city. And in New York, a ban on crowds of 500 or more, Broadway dark, concert halls and museums set to close. And that state of emergency here in New York City, the mayor reporting a major jump in cases today, 95 confirmed cases, saying there could be 1,000 in just a week. The NCAA tournament canceled, the NBA season suspended, and that chaos across much of Europe tonight. Americans are rushing to get home after President Trump announced overnight that 30-day travel ban from Europe to the U.S. It caused a lot of confusion, and we'll explain tonight. Passengers right there in Barcelona lining up for a flight back home. While on Capitol Hill today, Dr. Anthony Fauci from the National Institutes of Health acknowledging after they were asked about testing in this country, he said the system is not really geared for what we need right now, saying, quote, it is a failing. And word tonight from Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, who have tested positive. They described their symptoms and when they knew they needed to be tested. We begin here with ABC's Chief National Affairs Correspondent Tom Yamas tonight.
Tonight, preparing for life in the pandemic. In New York, National Guard troops tasked with delivering an estimated 400,000 pounds of food. The first shipments sent directly to that hot zone outside of Manhattan. We were there as the food arrived.
Here in New Rochelle, the National Guard has been activated. They're bringing in bags and bags of food. These are mostly non-perishables, but they also have lunches prepared for children, breakfast as well. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in this area, but one thing is certain. They want to make sure families don't go hungry.
So many here told to stay home, living in the nation's first containment zone. This warning outside of a reported testing facility. Keep all windows closed. More than 100 cases here in New Rochelle. And in New York City, with 42 new cases today, the mayor declaring a state of emergency.
I think we have to fully understand this is the shape of things to come.
This as New York bans all gatherings of 500 people. Starting tonight, the lights will go out on Broadway. The Great White Way told to shut down, along with performances at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center.
So we're going to take very dramatic actions in that regard to reduce the number of people in contagious environment.
New York following the lead of states like California, Oregon, and Washington, all cracking down on crowds because of the coronavirus. More than 2,100 school closures nationwide, affecting an estimated 1.3 million school children. Scores of colleges and universities also canceling classes. From San Jose to Salt Lake to Boston, so-called surge tents popping up, ER rooms preparing for potential patient overflow, as doctors across the country are sounding the alarm on the need for more testing.
Right now, we're really limited, and the demand for testing far outweighs what the state's capacity is.
Today, federal officials were pressed on who was in charge of making sure people who needed to be tested, including healthcare workers, are.
There's not one person that can ensure that these tests can be administered. Yes or no?
My colleague is looking at me to answer. Here we go.
Okay.
The country's top infectious disease doctor making this admission.
The system is not really geared to what we need right now, what you are asking for. That is a failing.
And a failing, yes.
It is a failing. I mean, let's admit it.
As doctors scramble, so are Americans stuck overseas.
To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days.
The president's surprise travel ban on most flights from Europe, leading to chaos at some airports.
It's just honestly pandemonium. No one knows what's happening. I don't know if this ban currently applies to U.S. citizens, but I'm not going to risk it because I do not want to be stuck in Barcelona for 30 days.
The White House later clarifying the ban will only apply to foreign nationals, not citizens or green card holders. But travel could get worse. The president not ruling out imposing domestic travel bans.
Are you considering any travel restrictions within the United States, such as to Washington State or California?
We haven't discussed that yet. Is it a possibility? Yes, if somebody gets a little bit out of control, if an area gets too hot.
And overnight, a scare in the air for passengers aboard a JetBlue flight from New York's JFK to West Palm Beach. Officials say a passenger alerted the crew upon landing. He received a notification he tested positive for the coronavirus.
An individual on this flight got a text that he tested positive for the coronavirus.
The plane and both airports sterilized. Passengers released, told to monitor their health over the next few days.
So let's get to Tom Llamas, who's leading us off tonight from New York. And Tom, I know here in New York City with those new rules, they limit crowd sizes. Right now, still no plans to shut down mass transit. But the bigger picture tonight, and you tried to clarify there in your report, because there was so much confusion after the president spoke last night, Americans will still be allowed to travel home from around the world and Europe, even during this 30-day ban?
That's right, David. To be absolutely clear, foreign nationals from certain parts of Europe right now are affected by that new travel ban. As you mentioned, here in New York, there is a state of emergency in the city. Cases have spiked, but the mayor making it clear that mass transit will not be shut down, though transit officials, David, say ridership is down. David?
All right, Tom Llamas leading us off. Thank you, Tom. And also breaking at this hour, the financial markets in free fall, the worst day since this emergency began. The Dow seeing its worst point loss ever, the worst day since Black Monday crash of 1987. Trading, in fact, halted for a time yet again. The Dow losing more than 2,300 points, a 10% drop. And all of this happened even with emergency action from the Fed. So let's get right back to our chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, tonight. Rebecca?
David, the president's announcement last night and the Fed's announcement today to pump $1.5 trillion of emergency funding into the markets did little to stem the volatility here. As it stands, the Dow is now down 28% from its record high hit just last month. And take a look at this. As it stands, the market is now back where it was in June of 2017. And the feeling here on Wall Street is until we know the extent of the health problems, we won't know the extent of the economic ones. David?
All right, Rebecca, our thanks to you as well. The NCAA tournament now canceled, the NBA suspending its season. And that news tonight from Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson in isolation after both tested positive, and they described their symptoms. Here's ABC's chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, tonight.
Tonight, the American entertainment industry shutting down. The cascade of announcements coming fast in recent hours, punctuated by Disneyland's statement that it will close what is perhaps the icon of American entertainment until the end of the month. And for the first time in all of their histories, the NBA, Major League Baseball, soccer, and the NHL suspending their seasons. And the NCAA suspending its hugely popular tournament If it happens, March Madness will not happen in March. And the coronavirus hitting the heart of the NBA, the season suspended after 2 Utah Jazz players, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, tested positive for the virus. Earlier this week, Gobert trying for a lighthearted moment in a dark time, touching tape recorders and microphones at a news conference. And then, moments before tip-off Wednesday, with fans already in the arena, the NBA sending everybody home after discovering Gobert had tested positive.
The game tonight has been postponed. You are all safe. And take your time in leaving the arena tonight.
The Jazz now in self-quarantine, as are all the players in the 5 teams they recently played against. Gobert apologizing, writing, "At the time, I didn't know I was infected." And arguably Hollywood's most relatable star, Tom Hanks, revealing he too has contracted the virus. The Oscar winner, who has diabetes, posting this picture to Instagram from Australia, saying, "We felt a bit tired, like we had colds and some body aches." Hank's wife, Rita Wilson, who's a breast cancer survivor, also testing positive for the virus days after performing in front of a sold-out crowd in Brisbane. The star of Castaway and Saving Private Ryan revealing that they wanted to play things right and get tested. The closure of Disneyland, part of the ripple effect of an executive order issued by California's governor.
We do have in this executive order the ability to commandeer existing private sector assets, including hotels and motels.
3 empty hotels already taken over. More have been earmarked. This comes as California still grappling with the last few hundred passengers aboard that stricken cruise ship. This is the second outbreak aboard Princess Cruise, compelling the cruise line to cancel all cruises for 60 days. Viking Cruises following suit.
All right, so let's bring in Matt Gutman with us again tonight. And Matt, these actions closing down all of these sporting events, now Disneyland. Before we came on the air tonight, we learned of that. And as you said, all of this is unprecedented, but authorities realizing across this country that they need to do this to try to slow this down.
They do, David, and they don't really have another choice. This is part of government pandemic planning. Now, I spoke with public health officials just a few minutes ago, and they basically say that short of a vaccine and therapeutics, the only tool they have to try to contain this outbreak is to severely limit our social interaction. David.
All right, Matt Gutman from California. Matt, our thanks to you again as well. And as we reported at the top tonight, Dr. Anthony Fauci of the NIH telling Congress just today that our system of testing for the virus across this country is failing. President Trump today said about testing, it's been going very smooth. And this image tonight, it was just days ago at Mar-a-Lago. The president with Brazilian officials there, and you can see the man on the right with the hat on. He's now tested positive for coronavirus. Obviously, a lot of questions about this. The White House tonight saying the president does not need to be tested. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
President Trump today insisted when it comes to coronavirus testing, everything is going according to plan.
Frankly, the testing has been going very smooth.
But today, even some of the president's fellow Republicans weren't buying it.
People should not say, if you want a test, you go get a test right now. That's coming. That's not here at this point.
Well, we're not the best equipped nation in terms of testing. That's absolutely obvious.
We all want on a date. We all want to be told by Friday there'll be 10 million tests available. The problem is they can't tell us that.
And there was that acknowledgement from Dr. Anthony Fauci, the government's leading expert on coronavirus.
The idea of anybody getting it easily, the way people in other countries are doing it, we're not set up for that. Do I think we should be? Yes, but we're not.
And the president also falsely said today that everybody coming to the United States from Europe is being tested.
Well, we have them very heavily tested. If an American's coming back or anybody's coming back, we're testing. We have a tremendous testing setup where people coming in have to be tested.
That claim is not true. ABC News has spoken to multiple people who returned to the United States today from Europe who were not tested. The CDC did not respond to questions about the president's comments. Today, the president is facing questions about whether he himself should be tested after he was photographed over the weekend in Mar-a-Lago with a Brazilian official who has tested positive.
Let's put it this way, I'm not concerned.
Here is another image of the president with the same man who tested positive. Still, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham said in a statement, quote, both the president and vice president had almost no interactions with the individual who tested positive and do not require being tested at this time.
So let's get to John Carl, and I wanted to get back to that image, John, that you just reported on, because a lot of attention was paid to what we saw today. President Trump, it was just a couple of days ago, obviously standing right next to those officials from Brazil. The man on the far right there is now tested positive for coronavirus, right next to the president. We know that several Republican senators who were at that event have self-quarantined, but you've learned that the president has not been tested himself?
And David, I actually checked just minutes ago, and still the president has not been tested, and White House officials say they do not believe he needs to be tested.
All right, John, thanks. Tonight, France now closing all schools and universities, and sobering words from the French president tonight, calling the coronavirus the most serious health crisis in a century. International soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo in home isolation, his whole team after a teammate tested positive. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in self-isolation tonight after his wife, Sophie, exhibited symptoms after returning from the UK. And tonight you will see right here the agonizing plea from a brother in Italy and what then plays out behind him as the situation only worsens in that country. We warn you, it's difficult, and here's ABC's James Longman.
Tonight, a heartbreaking call for help. This man saying his sister, lying on the bed behind him, is dead, falling victim to the illness Saturday. He says the authorities abandoned him, claiming they refused to collect the body at first, only coming after his pleas. She's now one of more than 1,000 Italians who won't wake up from Italy's nightmare. Makeshift tents to treat the sick, fighting for their lives and their dignity. One hospital reportedly receiving a new patient every 5 minutes. Experts warning Italy is still 2 weeks away from the outbreak's peak, as more than 60 million people are urged to stay at home. This doctor in Madrid, another victim of Europe's contagion, documenting his illness to thousands of followers.
I'm symptomatic right now. I feel tired with little dry cough.
The virus does not discriminate. The world's most famous soccer star, Ronaldo, in home isolation after a teammate tested positive for COVID-19. And the wife of Canada's Prime Minister now showing symptoms after a trip to the UK. The Trudeaus now both in isolation, waiting for their results. And in the UK, a dark warning from Prime Minister Boris Johnson about what lies ahead.
Many more families are going to lose loved ones before their time.
And late tonight, France's president echoing that alarm, closing all schools and universities, calling it the most serious health crisis France has faced in a century.
And so let's get to James Longman with us again tonight. He's from self-quarantine there in London. And as we've been reporting here for days now, it was suggested upon landing back in the UK after reporting from Italy 3 times for us. Authorities suggested to James that he's self-quarantined, so that's what he's doing. James, you reported tonight that Italy, it's still believed, is 2 weeks from its peak. And these numbers were really telling. From the World Health Organization, it says that Italy has more hospitals